I want teaching to be this career that everybody wants to do and everybody wants to have, right? And some people are like, man, I'd love to be a teacher. I just don't have the skill set or the talent, right? Like, and I just can't learn it. The same way that we look at like singers that we love, right? Like, oh, I'd love to be a singer. I just don't have a great voice.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Next Big Thing podcast, where today we welcome Brooke Barrett, the founder and president of BenchK12. BenchK12 is a company using modern technology to solve the teacher shortage. So, Brooke, we're super excited to have you. Thank you for taking your time to join us today.
Thank you, guys. And just at the outset, because I was not on my calendar the way that I should have been, happy Juneteenth to everybody as well.
Yes. We are recording this on June 19th. Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining and inviting me to join today. I'm really excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah. So with that being said, why don't we hand it off to you, Brooke, and tell us a little bit about what BenchK12 is doing.
Sure. So as you said, got our tagline right. We're the future of work for K-12 educators. Our first few modules are focused on substitute teachers, paraprofessionals, and tutors, actually, in school districts. But essentially, one of the problems that I saw, because I was an educator 20 some years ago, believe it or not, was that it was really, really challenging to get credentialed to become a teacher, even going through an alternative certification program. Going through that process, I often kind of cite this experience of a couple of days before I was supposed to go into the classroom. My district called me and said, hey, there's actually a freeze right now on contracting. So you can't start in your classroom unless you want to get credentialed to be a long-term sub in your own class. So I actually had to go through a secondary credentialing process and started my job as a substitute teacher within my own classroom. So I was subbing for myself, essentially. So, fast forward 20 plus years, I've had a career in K-12 management consulting through a firm that I stood up, worked in nonprofits, worked in philanthropy, had other teaching jobs in post-secondary world. But I came back to this problem where we were still having a lot of challenges with technology around licensure and credentialing, as well as just technology that can actually support educators themselves as they're advancing in their careers. So, in many ways, there's a lot of other industries that kind of benefit from a lot of the technology that we're talking about and that we're building, but education hasn't been one of them. So,
now, Brooke, I heard you mention doing some research in previous podcasts that there's a supply issue and a retention issue with substitute teachers.
Yeah.
Can you separate those two issues and talk about the specific problems that each issue presents itself with?
Sure. So, you're exactly right. It's a supply issue and a retention issue, right? So right now, technology can only do so much, right? We can't change things like teacher pay, which is a big retention issue. But we can change things about the way that teachers are supported on the retention side of things. But before we get into that, right, people have to get into the classroom. So on the supply side, what we've been seeing, at least with substitute teachers and arguably with every educator, certificated education role, is that there's increasing demand and the supply just isn't meeting it. So there's a couple of things that are happening. One, if you look at kind of the history of education as a profession, there was a ready pool of employees ready to be educators, and it was women, right? So women were largely confined to roles as teachers and nurses for a very long time, right? As those market dynamics shifted, right, and women got new opportunities to go into other jobs in the workforce, right? All of a sudden, this ready supply of professionals disappeared, right? So then it's like, okay, how do we open up education, right, to more folks? And so you see a little bit of that happening with teacher preparation programs, but then you also saw the emergence of programs like Teach for America, right? New Teacher Project, which I was part of, that we're all trying to recruit like these highly capable, like recent college grads, right? And say, hey, let's get them on a pathway to be in education. So the profession has seen a lot of changes in terms of the marketplace and where they're drawing educators from. But recently, there's actually been a huge decline in terms of students enrolling in teacher preparation programs. So that paired with things like the gig economy, right, especially with substitute teachers, right, you're seeing that it's a lot easier to become a DoorDash driver or do something for Amazon, right, than it is to go get a job as a substitute teacher, right? So you have this other impact of the gig economy that's also kind of pulling away from that short-term substitute teacher workforce. And that's also, an opportunity for people to kind of get their hands wet, or their feet wet rather, and their hands dirty with substitute teaching and consider teaching as a career, right? So if we're losing that pathway as well, right, that has broader implications too on the larger teaching force. On the retention side, this is a really long answer, but on the retention side, right, we've seen issues obviously with pay that have been huge. But one of the things that we are hearing increasingly, at least from substitute teachers and paraprofessionals, right, was that, they're not kind of seen with the same kind of level of respect, right, that other educators are being given, right? So, if you Google substitute teachers and click on your video links, right, you're going to see Key and Peele making jokes, right, about subs, right? You'll see Lin-Manuel Miranda, right, on SNL, right, as like the cool substitute, right? So there's all of these kinds of jokes, and we can even remember, like, right, and when we were kids and we had substitute teachers, right, like some of them were just like, oh, that one's an easy mark, right? Like, we're going to give this one a hard time, right? Or other ones were like your favorite substitute teacher because it was like having a cool older brother or sister in the classroom for a day, right? But what we're hearing from subs is that when they don't feel prepared getting into the classrooms, so, oh, sorry, my dogs are barking. Hopefully you can't hear that. Good. They're saying that they don't feel supported when they go into the classrooms, right? So simple things like, where do I park on the first day of school? Who's my point of contact? Who do I go for lesson plans, right? All of these things, like, how do I take attendance? Where can I get a roster of the kids in my class? Unfortunately, even things like, what's the active shooter protocols, right, for this school, right? Things that we didn't always have to think about or consider before. And so with our app, we're also providing a lot of those kind of workplace supports as well for substitutes. And we will continue that for teachers as well.
So it seems like the common theme is just making it easier for people to be substitute teachers and having to go through less effort in order to get the supply higher.
Yeah.
When it comes to the credentials, though, because the issue isn't that there aren't people in the community capable of teaching. The issue is just the credential process. So is BenchK12 trying to change the credentials or trying to speed up the credential process?
So I would say, the first rule, I think, with technology adoption is make people's lives easier, right? Don't ask them to change their behavior. Or if you're going to ask them to change their behavior, do it because it makes their lives easier, right? Like, we all adopted smartphones, right, because it made our lives easier. Like, even my dad, who's 78, right, finally got on board with a smartphone, right, because it made his life easier. So that's kind of our first step, right, is we want to make the lives of educator candidates, but also those folks at state licensing boards, we want to make their work easier, right? So one of the ways that we do that is using verified credentials powered by blockchain. So we've got a number of really great partners who specialize in criminal background checks, education verification, work experience, references, all of those things, where they're able to pull back those references, 75% of them within a couple of days, rather than somebody having to go back to every single employer, right, and say, hey, I need proof of employment, right? Or without that licensing board having to call and verify that employment. Or, in the case of a criminal background check, right? This is something that we've seen that's a huge challenge for folks, right? And it's an area I think that's also ripe for disruption. But, we rely on fingerprinting, and typically it's a fingerprint card that is used today to get somebody fingerprinted to do a criminal background check. Our partners at Sterling and ID.me would say that's really antiquated, right? Like, most of the ways that we verify somebody's criminal record now is based on identity. And so we've got this identity partner with ID.me, right, who verifies that somebody is who they say they are. That data goes to our partners over at Sterling, and Sterling's able to pull up all of those records. However, a lot of states still have legislative requirements requiring that fingerprinting, which really slows down the process. So in terms of changing behavior, right, like, there may have to be a little bit of negotiation, right? And we're finding that the state licensing agencies, right, are all for this innovation, but sometimes there's legislation that's in the way, right, that doesn't allow them to move away from that fingerprinting component, even though the fingerprinting doesn't add a lot, right? So there is some changes that I think will have to come about in the space. But for right now, we're trying to say, what are the things that we can do today to make your life easier and make this process faster? The things that might have to change, it's kind of trust but verify. So I think if we get them comfortable on the platform, comfortable with this idea of fingerprintless identity checks and background checks, right, then maybe we move towards that future.
So you definitely have a very extensive background in the education industry. I come from a line of a few elementary school teachers. So one of the biggest things that I've been hearing about over the past 3 years since COVID happened is how much the education landscape has changed. Can you talk about that from your perspective and what changes you've seen?
Sure. So, for me, like I'm not in the classroom every day anymore, right? So I really rely on like you're hearing from your, family members who are teachers, right? I'm really relying on the folks in my life who are still in the classroom, as well as, talking to a lot of folks that are on the ground kind of living this reality of this, I don't even want to say post-COVID world, because I just got over COVID a couple of weeks ago for the first time. But in this like new COVID aware world, right? And so I think what we're seeing, right, is a couple of things that we're hearing a lot about. One, right, there's massive burnout of teachers, right? Everybody was burned out from the pandemic. I don't care what role you were in anywhere. Like we all underwent this massive trauma together. And then we were all launched back out into the world like everything was supposed to be fine. But teachers were really burnt out. And then, you had a lot fewer substitutes already pre-COVID. And then now when COVID hits, right, there's even fewer substitute teachers available. So those teachers that are really burnt out, like can't take a day off of work, right, to recharge because there's nobody to cover their classroom. Now we're seeing a lot of teachers leaving the profession because of burnout. So that compounded problem, right, that we saw of shortages, whether it's substitute or teachers pre-COVID, has all been compounded by the pandemic, right? So we're seeing increases of 30, 40%, right, in terms of vacancies in classrooms. There was a study done recently, I believe it was by Rand, that said 86% of principals within the study and educators that they talked to all see teacher shortages as like one of the most major problems that they're dealing with right now in education.
So one thing you touched on earlier too was pay. And I feel like that's probably like the number one talking point whenever you talk to people about education, something we pretty much everyone agrees on.
Yep.
What's the pathway to that? Is there a way to fix that? I know because you're in an industry, you're in GovTech, obviously. So you might have a little bit more of an insight. What do you see the path being there?
So it's interesting, right? So one of the things that was fascinating to me, so I would say, I want to say maybe in 21, maybe it was a little earlier than that. McKinsey did a really interesting study on kind of all of the mobility that was kind of happening in the workplace, right? So you saw a lot of shifts happening, right, in terms of how people were working, where they wanted to work, all of that. And they looked at kind of all of these different elements, right, that drive satisfaction at work. And obviously pay is one of those things, but there's also a lot of other things beyond pay that make you want to do a job, right? So like you feel like your contributions are meaningful, right? You feel connected to your colleagues and the work that you're doing, right? There's all these other things that actually come up higher than pay. Not that pay isn't relevant, right? But, pay is a big thing. So we know that if we can do some of these things in education that I was talking about, that supported, feeling connected to where you're working, feeling like there's a pathway for you, right? That can actually have a sizable impact on retention issues and things like that, if we can't touch pay, right, as a company, that can have an impact. But with teacher pay more broadly, right, I think that there's a lot of interesting dynamics there, right? I would say that one piece of it that's a looming issue that we don't talk enough about is teacher pensions. So government, in much the same way that we've got issues funding Social Security, right? State governments have huge issues right now funding pensions. There's a giant hole in a lot of state budgets for that. So I think there's a pension issue, right, where we've given these very generous pensions, right, to kind of offset the fact that teachers don't get high rates of pay compared to other industries that they might be qualified for, right? I think as states start to look at pensions and try to negotiate there, right, like there's an offset there where you're going to have to say, okay, then if I'm not going to get this lucrative pension anymore, then I'm going to have to get paid more, right? But even today, right, we're seeing pay rates that are ridiculous. Like, so for substitute teachers, right, on average, it costs $300 to get credentialed to be a substitute teacher. And on average, nationwide, they get paid $100 a day. So, the upfront investment, exactly that face, exactly, Connor, right? Like, like you're spending $300. So you're not even going to recoup your costs, right? Your actual cost of becoming a substitute until you're like 4 or 5 sessions in, right? If you're looking at post-tax take home pay, right? So it's like, there are simple things in my mind, like, could we potentially, like, for high need areas, right? Like nurses and teachers and other professions, like, maybe let's not charge people to get credentialed as they enter the profession. Maybe it's just charging them to get renewed, right? Once they've gotten established, right? But that initial cost, like, let's remove that cost from the equation so like we can actually get more people in, right? Because again, if I'm looking at Uber or DoorDash, right, like they're not charging me $300 to get started there, right? Like, yeah, I need a car, but presumably, like, people have ways to get access to a car, right, to start that job. So, I think that's one piece that we could take advantage of. And then I think the other piece that we're really looking at is how can we also incentivize kind of great educators, right? So with substitutes, right, a lot of them don't get a lot of professional development. So can we actually set up with our local district partners ways for them to get a lot more professional development and get rewarded for that on the pay side, right? So if they choose to do ongoing professional development to get better at something, say it's classroom management, which for substitute teachers is very different than a regular teacher, like, let's bump them up, right? Like $1 in pay, like, or $5 per vacancy, right, that they fill. Let's incentivize them to do that. But then let's also, like, if they're looking at a sub and they're like, wow, I really like substitute teaching and I want to be a teacher, let's give them a free pathway to becoming a teacher, right? So I think there's a lot of upfront costs that we can do something about. And then the teacher pay thing, I think, is something that we really have to tackle and really have to start prioritizing. But unfortunately, that all comes back to us paying taxes as taxpayers, right? So there's no around that. So I think we have to start looking at taxes as an investment in our society rather than, this horrible thing that we have to do every April.
So bringing it back to Bench K12, and you talked a lot about the states, and they're your core customer. And you talked about how licensing with them is most of your operation of acquiring customers. So what has their feedback been? What are the conversations you've had with them? What they think about your product, where they see it going, and how's your relationship been with the state so far?
Yeah. So, I mean, really candidly, it was slow going for us for a while, largely because, and this is probably the side of me that has been an educator for too long, right? Like, I knew the pain points that they were going through with COVID. So I wasn't knocking on a lot of doors, right? Like, I was like, let's focus on building, let's focus on putting this out there, right, for them to find. But like, I'm not a hard sales kind of person, right? Like, even as a consultant, it was very relational for me. It was very much about like, what's the problem? How can I help you solve it? Right. And so we had about 6 states that found us, right? Like, through not a lot of, pushing, right? Who were on our wait list and have been on our wait list for the product for the last year and a half or so. And then we actually just sponsored this conference called the NASDAQ conference. Basically, it's the national, I'm going to screw up the acronym, but basically it's the National Association for the folks who license and credential teachers, right, nationwide. So all of those licensing boards kind of get together multiple times a year. This was their annual conference that we just got back from in Phoenix. So we got to get in front of like, all of them at that conference. And it went better than could have been expected, right? So at this point, we've now got 16 states that are really interested in our product and are really excited about it. So, we're obviously excited to talk to them. Most of them are out of the office today celebrating Juneteenth. So, we've dropped some emails in saying, hope you're reading this Tuesday. We're excited to follow up with you. But they've kind of shared with us kind of some of the issues with background checks that I talked about before. And, otherwise, they're very excited to have technology that doesn't look like a really old database in front of them now.
That is awesome. Just with the conference and the opportunities that you were that presented itself, and getting those 16 states is it a letter of intent? when
So
the
not
product
letters of
shows up?
intent, not letters of intent yet, right? So our goal right now, we're going to do up to 5 states to pilot the product. And which is kind of a new thing too, in government. So usually government will go through a procurement process. They'll demo some products and then they'll, choose one and onboard it. And we're saying, nope, you get to try our entire product before you buy, right? And that was something that was like very, very important for us to do, because having been on the other side of this problem, right? So I served for a while as the Deputy Chief Technology Officer for San Francisco Unified. We were undergoing a number of different kind of technology transformation projects. And, it's pretty impossible to stand up like an entire new HR system, right, before you buy it. But a lot of times we just found that, vendors would sell us certain things, right? And say, oh, you can customize this, you can do that, right? Like, yes, 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 right? And then we'd actually get the product and we were like, oh, wow, this is going to take us years to get this up and going, right? So we really wanted to kind of be able to give these licensing boards access to the product and be able to try it in a real way before they committed. So what we're focused on right now is who are those first state pilots going to be out of the 16. So we're looking to sign those pilot contracts.
So when we were talking before the podcast started, we got into your entrepreneurial journey a little bit. Can you bring us through how BenchK12 kind of started, where the idea came from, the steps along the way? I know you attended the YC Startup School. What's that journey been like?
So I think every founder will tell you their journeys all look a little bit different. I would say, I don't want to say I'm a non-traditional founder because I think there's a lot of us in our 40s, right, who are founding companies. But I think a lot of the press tends to be guys like you, right? Like, coming out of college, a lot of enthusiasm, great ideas, right? And there isn't a ton of press about folks who kind of do this a little bit later in life. So it's weird for me to feel like kind of the old woman in a room. But, my career, I started off as a classroom educator. I kind of told you guys a little bit about that journey, but then from there, I actually went to law school. And I thought that I was going to work on litigating funding inequities, basically in education. So New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut were kind of the 3 states that were really kind of leading the pack on funding inequities. And so I went to law school in New Jersey, did a year at Seton Hall, had amazing professors, and came out with some really amazing friends. But I also realized that sitting behind a computer for the rest of my life writing briefs was probably not going to be my path. And so when I was in Newark, I got involved in a number of different things. I got involved in some political things as well as nonprofit work, and ultimately got my master's in urban policy and management at the New School in New York while continuing to live in Newark and work in Newark. And when I was in Newark, I worked in nonprofit philanthropy and higher ed. And from there moved into consulting, which kind of took me through a whole journey of things, right? So I worked with emerging ed tech companies. I worked with foundations. I worked with state departments of ed, school districts, right, on a number of different things. But I would say probably about the last 8 to 10 years of my consulting practice, I was really focused on kind of technology and data infrastructure. So that kind of brought technology into my world at that point, right, professionally. And what I was seeing was a lack of interoperability, right? So, we created what was called an education data maturity model at the time to kind of look at how different education agencies and actors, right, were maturing in their data use, right? So everybody has gone through this data maturation process, right, where you start collecting a little bit of data, right? You start bringing on some systems, right? It's a little piecemeal. Then you start realizing like, oh, these systems aren't talking to each other, but I need them to. Sometimes you go through a consolidation. Sometimes you deconsolidate, right? So there's all these steps that you go on your journey. And we were really seeing in education that there were so many different folks in different places, right? So if you're a charter school, like you're not dealing with legacy technology systems, right? Because you're fairly new. But districts are dealing with legacy technology that they have to migrate away from, right? Or change systems or practices for, right? So there's just different things that kind of happen as a piece of that. But it was a really amazing education for me. And it all started to come full circle, right? So I'm seeing all these shortages. I'm at San Francisco. I'm working with a colleague there who has served as a CTO in a number of different districts before San Francisco. And when COVID hit, she and I are just like, these teacher shortages are just going to kill everybody, right? Like people are going to be burnt out, right? Like, all the things that we're seeing, right, unfortunately came to pass. And so we're like, what can we do to really change this? And so I had some time because all the consulting projects that I worked on were usually like nice to have projects, not need to have. So like all hands on deck to go to remote learning. So like I'm sitting back, like kind of observing this, saying like, okay, I've got some time on my hands. Like, let's start to work on this problem. And originally it started off as like, okay, we just need to match substitute teachers better, right, to placements. Like, let's give teachers more information about subs so they can find the right sub for their classroom. But as we kept digging into the problem, right, we were seeing like, let's look at the entire life cycle of a substitute teacher, right? Let's look at the entire life cycle of a teacher. What are all the things that technology can do to support that from beginning to end? And then that's, kind of how the full vision of Bench kind of came to.
So it started with substitute teachers. What is 5 years, 10 years from now, the vision you have for BenchK12?
Yeah. So substitute teachers were kind of our first stop. One, because that was like an immediate pain point, right? Like, what could we triage in this moment? We know that credentialing teachers is a lot more involved than substitutes, right? Because you're looking at like coursework, you're looking at a lot of different things that you don't look at with just substitutes. So the technology has to be more mature to handle those things. But substitutes was like, okay, yes, we can get this right away. We then found that like, oh, paraprofessionals are pretty similar to substitutes in their hiring process. Let's add that as another role type that we can support. And tutors are another role type that we can support, right? So we actually added those role types much faster than I anticipated. Like I anticipated like by year 5, we'd have substitutes locked, right? That product expanding into others, right? We've added paras and tutors much faster. But our goal ultimately is to serve every certificated role in K-12. So that's administrators, teachers, bus drivers, right? Like you name it, like we want to be that one place for every role in K-12. And even in our first year, we had a lot of international interest because this teacher shortage is not uniquely a US problem. It's actually a massive global problem. And so we had interest from Israel, from Canada, from the UK, from Australia, New Zealand, right? Like a lot of folks that have similar systems to ours were all interested in what we were building. So I think, 10 years, hopefully we've made significant progress on this problem here in the US and have, at least half of states as part of our market share. And then I think we're looking international in 10 years.
So you are the first female founder we've had on the Next Big Thing. So thank you for coming. I'm interested if you've encountered...
We have to change that. I know a bunch that'll talk to you guys.
No, I would believe me. Send them our way. What has it been like? Has there been any difficulties? Have you seen any hardships or anything you've had to deal with being a female founder? Anything that's been different?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. So I was raised by my dad as a single parent. So, I don't want to say that I was the son he never had, right? Because he's so excited to have a daughter and says like he's so grateful that he had a daughter. But I think being raised by a man, right, was a different worldview, right, that I think most women are brought up with. And then I went to college at a women's college, right? So, which was a very distinctly like feminist environment, right? And not that my dad wasn't a feminist, right? Like he was probably the first and ultimate feminist in my life. Because he was always like, oh yeah, you can do anything, right? Like go play soccer with the boys, right? Like go do all of these things, right? So I never thought that much about my gender growing up, honestly. And I had a lot of male friends growing up because I just felt comfortable with them. But like going to a women's college, right? Like I came a lot more into my awareness of like the different challenges that are present for women, right? But it was also an environment where it was like every woman was expected to lead because there were no men on campus to lead, right? Like, so it was always women running for, student body president or class president or whatever, right? So it was this great model of also seeing, again, women doing whatever they wanted to do. And it really wasn't until I kind of stepped into kind of this world where I became super aware of my gender. In terms of just the different types of questions that we get asked, right? So I think, and there's been some really great research on this, right? So when women founders tend to get asked questions, there's an assumption of failure rather than success, right? So Connor, you asked this great question, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years, right? like we might get a question where it's like, if you don't get enough states, right, then what happens, rather than like, okay, so let's say you get all 25 states on board in the US in the next 5 years, like what's next, right? But it's just this slight variation, right, that's slightly different that comes with female founders. I will also say honestly that like my experience as a white female founder was significantly different from my initial co-founder, who was an Asian American woman and part of the LGBTQ community, right? And I especially want to call this out because we're also in Pride Month right now, right? But like, her experience was very, very different from mine. And I actually lost her early on as a founder because there was so much resistance and so much assumption of like her not being the accomplished professional that she was. Like, even in feedback that we got on a federal grant proposal was like, oh, you guys don't have a good technical team. And my CTO, right, had been developing technical solutions for 15 years, right? Like she was very accomplished. So I think it was like, well, we didn't see a man on the list, right, with like technical background, right? It was like they completely overlooked her, like she didn't exist. And her name is Sean too. So it was like also funny, like when we would get on a call, right, people would like, Sean's very masculine sounding name, right? And they'd see two women and they were like, oh my God, like it was sometimes like didn't know what to do with themselves. I get a lot of comments that I think are very well intended where like I'm pitching a VC and the guy is like, oh, you remind me so much of my daughter, right? Where it's like a very sweet thing to say. But like, I don't think most guys, like you would say like, oh, you remind me of my son, right? But they might say, you remind me of myself, right? And so that fact that like that person can connect with you as a founder as like a white male in a way that they can't connect with me because they see themselves, right, in that founder, means they're probably more likely to get funded than I am, right? So I think a lot of the bias that we see happening is not intentional, right? It's just these things where it's like you self-select what you know and you self-select the problems that you know to solve, right? Because you're comfortable in that space. And so I think that like definitely as we diversify who's in the leadership ranks in technology, who's giving out money, right? Who has access to money. But then also, as a founder, I try to be very intentional with my team, right? About like, this is my blind spot as a white woman. Like, what am I not considering, right? Or like even today, right, with Juneteenth, right? Like I sent out a message to my team saying like, hey, I want you guys to take a step back today, right? And reflect on what this holiday means for our country, but then also what it means to our work at BenchK12, right? Because there's a lot of inequity right now when we're looking at Black educators, right? And Black educators have a huge benefit, not only for Black students, but for white students, right? Because for white students, that might be the first time they've interacted with a Black person in a positive way. And they're going to take that experience with them throughout their life, right? So I think, whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about language, ability, right? All of these things, right? I think that there's some unintended bias that happens. I wasn't always expecting it. I didn't walk in, even though I saw the statistics, right? 2% of venture capital goes to women, right? Only 8% of GovTech founders are women, right? Like it didn't really hit home for me until I experienced it. And a lot of it, I think, is so not intended to be harmful, right? But it is.
So with all the, I guess, discrepancies and
Yeah.
inequalities you face throughout your entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
what is your mindset to just continue to push forward and keep going when you know the thought creeps in the back of your head, I don't know if this would have happened, but this happened to me. And so what is your thought process just to continue to push, keep going? Is it the mission? Is it the vision?
It's the mission, but I also think like, it was Father's Day yesterday. So it's like, I give my dad a lot of credit even, right? Like, because I didn't grow up in a gendered household, right? Like I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to have different opportunities because I was a girl, right? And so I still think that despite all of that, right, like what we're doing at BenchK12 has so much validity. And I think I'm really humbled every day because our team is so amazing. Like, I can't believe I get to get up every day and work with the people I get to work with, right? So it's like one of those things. But then we also have people constantly saying like, hey, can I come work for you guys? Can I come do, like, we have people coming to us wanting to like, join the company, right? So I feel like what we're doing resonates with a lot of people. And so that inspires me. And then also, honestly, like, being an educator, still having friends in the classroom, knowing how hard they work and the way that they show up for their kids every day and how much harder their job is than anything I'm doing right now, right? Because I lived it. And especially in this environment, their job's so much harder. Like anything that I encounter, right, is going to be easier than what they encounter, and we can push through it, right? And there's a lot of folks out there that are just going to see the value in what we're doing. And it's not going to be about my gender. It's not going to be about any of those other things. And so it's just finding those people, right? So hopefully some of them will see this, right? And we'll find them through this channel, right? But I think we have the opportunity to solve something really important and offer something really great. And so I think for me, it's the combination of all of those things.
And you mentioned you are raising capital on WeFunder right now, right?
Yep, we are.
So how has that process been? And how can people help if they love the mission of BenchK12? And then what are the next few steps going forward?
Yep. So you can find us on WeFunder. I think our round closes like in September or something like that. We're like allowed to raise for a certain number of months. So you can go there, invest as little as $100. If you can do more than that, great. It can also just be something as much as like, if you like our raise on the page, right, that like promotes us in the algorithm for WeFunder, right? If you can share something about our raise, right, with your community or what we're building, right, with other folks, like you never know who that's going to reach. So the sharing and the liking are just as important to us as receiving the dollars. So that's one way to help with the raise. The process of crowd fundraising is really interesting. It's massively time consuming. So for people that think like, oh, like I'm just going to go spin up a crowd fund, right? Like it is not that simple. So we had worked on setting up our crowd fund, I would say for like a year, right, before we actually launched. So the biggest thing is like, you want to have like, I think one of the things that's a little, I don't want to say misleading, it is what it is that like crowdfunding is supposed to replace your friends and family around, right? That's a lot of the kind of rhetoric around it. The reality is that you have to bring the crowd, right? So it's not like build it and they will come, right? Like they told us basically like, you guys need to have raised a significant amount of money before you launch, right? Because when you launch on that day, folks need to see that you guys already have money in and that people believe in you, right? So I still think that we've got a ways to go in terms of improving access to capital, right, in an equitable way, right? Because, we were able to successfully raise we actually raised close to 100,000. One of our angel investors didn't put in money through the WeFunder. They invested outside of the WeFunder. But, like that took me a year to pull together that money, right? Like I've raised over $20 million in like nonprofit and philanthropy. Like I never thought raising $1 million for this company was going to be as hard as it was. But it has been. So I think there's lots of reasons for that, right? Like GovTech being scary for some people, right? Which I actually think it's a safe investment in this economy, right? Because government's still going to be buying, even if other people aren't. But yeah, it's been a trip. It's a lot of work. Crowdfunding is not for the faint of heart.
No, you are not the only one that has said that. So I fully believe you.
Yes. Yes.
I want to leave you with one last question.
Yeah.
How is BenchK12 going to change the world?
So it's interesting. I was given, like at the beginning of January, I'm a part of this women's group called the F-Bomb Breakfast Club. And the tagline is basically women who talk like truckers and build badass businesses. They are an amazing group of women. They were actually our first big angel investment. They started doing a pitch competition. They put together a group of angel women investors this last year. We actually got to be their first angel investment. So they go by FBA Capital. So, when I'm talking to other investors, I don't have to say F-Bomb Angels, although I love saying it. So, it's a good litmus test for me a lot of times. But they also do like a lot of things outside of that, which is, it's just basically this women's affinity group, right? For us to connect and be able to talk about things that we're encountering as either founders or business owners or what have you. And one of them was like, okay, let's say that you're like on time, right? Like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or on Forbes or something, like what's the caption going to be, right? And for me, it's like, always like, I'm so used to being a number two. So like my big growth piece with this is having to be the face of the company, right? Like I'm not used to being the person that's always out in front. And so for me, it's hard to imagine being on the cover of a magazine. Like that terrifies me actually. But, I think for us, it's like, how basically Bench K-12 made teaching the hottest career, right? So like, I want teaching to like be that job that everybody wants to have, right? So like, in a dream world for me, it's not kids like imagining that they're going to be like, Kobe, right? It's like imagining that they're going to be like Mrs. Carberry, right? Like, or that other teacher, right? That they really love. And so like, I want teaching to be this career that everybody wants to do and everybody wants to have, right? And some people are like, man, I'd love to be a teacher. I just don't have the skill set or the talent, right? Like, and I just can't learn it, right? Like, in the same way that we look at like singers that we love, right? Like, oh, I'd love to be a singer. I just don't have a great voice, right? But I want teaching to be that job that everybody aspires to being. And I just, want the profession to be something that's respected again. So that's my biggest goal, I would say.
Well, Brooke, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. And I think everyone should check this out and, look on WeFunder. And as you said, even if, you can't invest the $100 or more, find a way to impact education positively.
Yes.
And so thank you.
And go and call your old teachers, like whatever that teacher was in your life that had an impact to get you guys doing what you're doing today. Just drop them a little email and say, hey, just had this really cool podcast today and thought of you. Give them a little, they'll be happy to hear.
I will do that. And so we wish you nothing but the best of luck, and we can't wait to see your success. And
thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you guys for the opportunity. Thanks for doing what you're doing. We appreciate you.
All right. And we will see you next time on the next big thing. So long.
Legolas.